My name is Georgia, and I'm 52 years old. I always thought I understood what family loyalty meant until the day my daughter-in-law's mother showed up at my doorstep with the most shocking claims I'd ever heard. You see, my late husband Robert and I spent decades building our dream home from the ground up, pouring every ounce of our savings and sweat into creating something beautiful for our family. We thought we were building a legacy, a safe haven, where love would always live. But sometimes the people closest to you can become strangers overnight, and sometimes those strangers will try to steal everything you've worked for right from under your nose. Before we dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button if you've ever felt betrayed by family, and don't forget to subscribe, because trust me, you won't believe how this situation unfolded and who really owned the house in the end. Let me take you back to the beginning, when everything in my world still made perfect sense. My relationship with my son Marcus was the kind that other mothers envied. From the time he was a little boy running through our 3-bedroom ranch house in suburban Ohio, we shared an unbreakable bond. Robert and I built that house in 1992, and I still remember the day we broke ground on our little piece of the American dream. Every brick, every beam, every carefully chosen paint color represented years of saving and planning. Robert would come home from his construction job, covered in dust, and we'd work together until dark, installing flooring and painting walls, dreaming about the family we'd raise within those walls. Marcus grew up in every corner of that house. I can still picture him at 8 years old, building forts in the living room on rainy Saturdays. The backyard witnessed his first steps, his first bicycle ride without training wheels, countless birthday parties, where neighborhood kids would run wild through our carefully maintained garden. When he graduated high school, we held the party right there in our kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd packed his lunch every morning for 12 years. Then came Sarah, and from the moment Marcus brought her home, I knew she was special. She was 24, then a sweet kindergarten teacher, with gentle eyes and a laugh that could fill our entire house with joy. What struck me most about Sarah was how hungry she seemed for family connection. She came from a difficult background, raised by a single mother who lived 3 states away and rarely made time for visits. Sarah's mother, Patricia, was a controlling woman who criticized everything Sarah did, from her career choice to her wardrobe to her relationship with Marcus. I immediately stepped into the role Sarah needed. We'd spend hours in my kitchen talking about everything from wedding plans to her dreams of having children someday. When she and Marcus got married in our backyard 5 years ago, I helped her choose every flower, every decoration. She called me her second mum, and I meant it when I told her she was the daughter I'd always wanted, but never had. The twins arrived 3 years later, Emma and Sophie, and suddenly our house was filled with the patter of little feet again. Sarah would bring the girls over every Sunday for dinner, and they'd tear through the house like tiny tornadoes, leaving behind a trail of toys and laughter. Those Sunday dinners became sacred to all of us. Robert would sit in his favorite armchair, bouncing one twin on each knee, while Sarah and I cleaned up in the kitchen, sharing stories about the girls' latest adventures. When Robert passed away from a sudden heart attack 2 years ago, I thought my world had ended. The house felt enormous and empty, without his presence filling every room. Marcus and Sarah suggested gently that I might want to consider downsizing, maybe finding a nice apartment closer to town. But I couldn't bear the thought of leaving the home where every memory of my life with Robert lived in the walls. Sarah understood completely. She'd bring the girls over even more often, sensing that I needed their energy and joy to chase away the loneliness that threatened to swallow me whole. Spring had always been my favorite season in Ohio, and that Tuesday morning in April started like any other. I was in my garden planting the tomatoes that Robert and I had grown together for 30 years, when I heard the rumble of a large truck coming down our quiet street. I looked up to see a U-Haul backing into my driveway, followed by a sleek silver sedan that I didn't recognize. What happened next still feels like a nightmare I can't wake up from. A woman emerged from the sedan, someone I'd only met a handful of times in the past 5 years. Patricia, Sarah's mother, strode up my driveway like she owned the place. She was dressed in an expensive navy suit that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 3 months. Her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun that made her sharp features look even more severe. 2 large men climbed out of the U-Haul and began unloading dollies and moving equipment. I stood there in my garden, dirt still clinging to my hands, completely bewildered by the scene unfolding before me. Patricia didn't even acknowledge my presence at first. She was too busy directing the moving men pointing toward my front door, like she had every right to be there. When she finally looked at me, her expression was cold and businesslike. "Georgia," she said in a tone you might use with a pest you were trying to shoo away, "I'm here to reclaim what belongs to my family. I need you to pack your personal belongings immediately because this house no longer belongs to you." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually stumbled backward, my gardening tools falling from my hands. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Patricia reached into her expensive leather purse and pulled out a manila folder, thick with official-looking documents. "The house was put in Marcus's name years ago," she announced, with the confidence of someone who'd planned this moment down to the last detail. "As his mother-in-law, and the person he's designated to handle family business, I have legal authority to make decisions about this property." My legs felt weak as I watched the moving men begin to approach my front door. This couldn't be happening. This was my home, the place where I'd lived for over 30 years, where I'd raised my son and created a lifetime of memories with my husband. "You can't just show up here and tell me to leave my own house," I said, my voice growing stronger with indignation. Patricia's smile was cold and triumphant. "Watch me," she said, pulling out her cell phone. "Marcus, it's Patricia. Yes, I'm at the house now with the movers. Could you please explain to your mother that the paperwork we discussed has been finalized?" She put the phone on speaker, and my son's voice filled the air between us. "Mom, I know this is confusing, but Patricia is right about the house papers. We had to make some changes for legal reasons, and Patricia offered to help coordinate everything since you seemed so overwhelmed after Dad died." The ground seemed to shift beneath my feet. My own son was confirming this woman's claims that my house wasn't mine anymore. "Marcus, what are you talking about? What paperwork? Nobody told me about any changes." "We can discuss the details later, Mom. Just cooperate with Patricia for now, okay? She knows what she's doing." Patricia ended the call with obvious satisfaction and gestured for the moving men to begin loading my belongings. "I'd suggest you start gathering your essentials," she said, checking her expensive watch. "The movers need to work efficiently, and I have other appointments today." I watched in horror as these strangers began carrying my furniture out of the house I'd called home for 30 years. Neighbors started gathering on the sidewalk, whispering among themselves, as they witnessed what appeared to be my complete humiliation. Mrs. Henderson from across the street looked genuinely concerned, but I was too shocked to even acknowledge her worried waves. Patricia supervised the operation, like a general commanding troops, directing the men to be careful with her family's belongings, while treating my possessions like they were worthless junk to be discarded. The whole scene felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart instead of my own. Just as the moving men were loading my dining room table onto their truck, Sarah's car pulled into the driveway. My heart leaped with relief. Surely Sarah would put a stop to this madness. She'd explained that there had been some terrible misunderstanding, that her mother had overstepped her bounds in the most outrageous way possible. But when Sarah got out of her car and saw the chaos, she didn't look surprised. She looked nervous, guilty like a child, caught doing something she knew was wrong. She avoided my eyes completely as she walked over to where her mother stood, supervising the destruction of my life. "Sarah, thank goodness you're here," I said, rushing toward her. "Your mother has lost her mind. She's claiming she has the right to kick me out of my own house and take all my belongings. Tell her this is all a mistake." Sarah looked at her shoes instead of at me. "Georgia, I'm so sorry. I tried to tell my mother that this wasn't the right way to handle things, but family situations can get complicated, and things just got out of hand." The words hit me harder than Patricia's initial announcement. Sarah knew. My daughter-in-law, the woman I'd treated like my own child, the mother of my beloved grandchildren, had known this was going to happen and hadn't warned me. Patricia stepped forward with a folder full of documents that she spread across the hood of Sarah's car like she was presenting evidence in a courtroom. Let me explain the reality of the situation, Georgia. When Robert died, Marcus was smart enough to transfer this house into his name to protect it from potential creditors and to ensure proper estate planning. You've been living here as his guest for the past 2 years. She showed me bank statements with Marcus's name on them, property tax documents that appeared to show him as the payer, and insurance papers that listed him as the homeowner. Everything looked official, legitimate, terrifyingly real. As you can see, Patricia continued, with the tone of someone explaining something to a slow child, Marcus has been covering all the expenses for this house, while you've contributed nothing. At your age, Georgia, that kind of arrangement can't continue indefinitely. Young families need their space to grow and prosper without the burden of supporting elderly relatives who can't take care of themselves. The cruelty in her words was breathtaking. She was painting me as some kind of charity case, a burden that my own son had been carrying out of obligation rather than love. That's not true, I protested. I pay the utilities, I buy the groceries, I maintain this house. Small contributions, Patricia dismissed with a wave of her hand. The real expenses, the important ones, have been Marcus's responsibility. And frankly, at your age, and with your obvious confusion about financial matters, it's time to transition to a more appropriate living situation. I looked at Sarah desperately, hoping to see some sign of the warm, loving relationship we'd built over the years. Instead, I saw a woman who couldn't meet my eyes, who was fidgeting with her car keys like she wanted to escape from the whole situation. Patricia opened another folder and pulled out glossy brochures for senior living communities. I've already done the research for you, Georgia. There are several lovely facilities within an hour's drive where you can make friends your own age and receive the care and supervision that someone in your situation requires. The word supervision stung like a slap. Patricia was talking about me like I was incompetent, like I was some confused old woman who couldn't be trusted to live independently. The moving men continued working around us, carrying out pieces of my life, while Patricia planned my future like I wasn't even there. She pulled out her phone and showed me photos of a sterile-looking apartment complex. Sunset Manor has an excellent reputation for caring for widows who are struggling with depression and adjustment issues. They have activities to keep you busy and medical staff on site 24 hours a day in case of emergencies. The reality of what was happening started to sink in. This wasn't just about the house. Patricia was orchestrating my complete removal from my family's life, packaging it as concern for my well-being while systematically destroying every connection I had to the people I loved most. That evening, when Marcus finally came home from work, he found his mother-in-law completely moved into what had been my master bedroom and me relegated to the guest room with a single suitcase of belongings. The house I'd called home for 30 years had been transformed into Patricia's domain in the span of a single day. I met Marcus at the front door, my heart breaking as I looked at the son I'd raised with so much love and sacrifice. Marcus, please tell me you're going to fix this. Please tell me you're going to make your mother-in-law leave and give me back my home. Marcus looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other like he used to do as a child when he'd been caught in a lie. Mom, it's not that simple. Patricia explained everything to me about the legal issues and the financial planning. She's been helping us navigate some complicated situations that you might not understand. What complicated situations? I demanded. What financial planning, Marcus? This is the house where your father and I raised you. This is the house where your daughters take their baths and play with their toys. How can you stand there and tell me I don't belong here anymore? Patricia appeared in the hallway behind Marcus, wearing one of my aprons and carrying a casserole dish like she was the lady of the house. Marcus, your mother is getting agitated again. I told you that emotional instability was one of the warning signs we needed to watch for. She'd been in my house for less than 12 hours and was already talking about me like I was a mental patient. Marcus looked between his mother and his mother-in-law, clearly torn, but ultimately choosing the path of least resistance. Patricia has experience with elder care issues, Mom. She knows what signs to look for when someone might need additional support. Patricia set down the casserole dish and pulled out yet another folder, this one filled with brochures and what appeared to be application paperwork. I've been in touch with Sunset Manor, and they have an opening in their assisted living wing. The timing is actually perfect because they rarely have availability on such short notice. She spread the papers across my own kitchen table like she was planning a vacation instead of destroying my life. The deposit has already been paid, and they can accommodate a move-in date as early as this weekend. The facility is only 3 hours away, so family visits will still be possible on special occasions. 3 hours away. Far enough to ensure that my relationship with Emma and Sophie would become occasional and superficial instead of the close daily connection we'd always shared. Patricia had planned this isolation carefully, ensuring that once I was moved out, staying connected with my family would become someone else's responsibility and burden. Marcus sat down at the table and started looking through the brochures without meeting my eyes. Some of these places look really nice, Mom. They have activities and meal plans, and you wouldn't have to worry about maintaining a house anymore. I don't want to worry about maintaining a house, I said, my voice breaking with emotion. I want to live in my house, the house where your father and I built our lives together, the house where you grew up, the house where your daughters should grow up, knowing their grandmother. Patricia's expression remained cold and calculating. Georgia, your grief over Robert's death has affected your judgment more than you realize. Marcus and Sarah need space to raise their children, without dealing with a depressed elderly woman who brings down the household mood. The twins are at an age where they need stability and positive energy, not constant exposure to sadness and confusion. The accusation was devastating. Patricia was suggesting that my presence in my grandchildren's lives was harmful, that loving them and wanting to be part of their daily world was somehow selfish and damaging. She was taking my grief, the natural response to losing my life partner, and twisting it into evidence that I was unfit to live in my own home. Marcus finally looked at me, and I saw guilt and uncertainty in his eyes, but he didn't defend me. He didn't tell Patricia that her assessment was wrong, that I was a loving grandmother who brought joy and stability to his daughters' lives. Instead, he picked up the application paperwork and started reading the fine print, like he was seriously considering shipping his mother off to institutional care. The moving timeline looks reasonable. Patricia continued discussing my future like I was a piece of furniture that needed to be relocated. If we handle the transition this weekend, Marcus and Sarah can start settling into their new normal without prolonging the emotional difficulty for everyone involved. I realized in that moment that Patricia had been working on this plan for months, maybe even since Robert's funeral. She'd been carefully poisoning my relationship with my son, planting seeds of doubt about my mental state and my ability to live independently. She'd convinced Marcus that keeping his mother close was a burden rather than a blessing, and she'd positioned herself as the wise advisor who could solve all their problems by making me disappear. That night, lying in the guest room of my own house, while Patricia slept in the master bedroom I'd shared with Robert for 30 years, I felt more alone than I had since the day my husband died. But somewhere in that darkness, a memory surfaced that changed everything. Robert had always been old-fashioned about important documents. He didn't trust computers or digital records when it came to things that mattered. Georgia, he used to say, papers can be forged and computers can be hacked, but a safety deposit box at the bank is forever. Every significant document related to our house, our finances and our legal affairs was stored in that safety deposit box, and only I had access to it. Patricia's documents might look official, but I knew they couldn't be real, because the real documents were sitting in First National Bank, where they'd been safely stored since the day we first bought our house. If Marcus had really transferred the property to his name, there would have to be notarized papers, legal filings, and official records that I would have had to sign personally. I started thinking more clearly about everything Patricia had shown me. The bank statements with Marcus's name could easily be falsified. The property tax documents could be photocopied and altered. Even the insurance papers might be elaborate forgeries designed to support her story. But the original deed, the mortgage papers and the title transfer documents that proved Robert and I were the true owners, were locked away where Patricia could never get to them. Around 2 a.m, I heard Patricia moving around in Robert's office, clearly searching for something. I crept to the door and listened to her opening desk drawers and filing cabinets, growing increasingly frustrated when she couldn't find whatever she was looking for. She was probably searching for the original house documents, the real papers that would expose her fraud. I quietly called my neighbor and longtime friend Helen, who'd been watching the whole situation unfold with growing concern. Helen had known Robert and me for 20 years, and she'd witnessed us building our life in that house from the very beginning. "Helen, I need your help," I whispered into the phone. "Can you meet me at First National Bank when it opens tomorrow morning? I think Patricia is trying to steal my house with fake documents, and I need to prove that I'm the real owner." Helen didn't hesitate. "Of course, honey. I'll pick you up at 8:30, and we'll get to the bottom of this nonsense once and for all." As I hung up the phone, I heard Patricia, on her cell phone in the next room, talking to someone about Phase 2 and how Marcus is easier to control than expected. She was discussing something about getting me permanently out of the picture and ensuring that the transition stays on schedule. This wasn't just about stealing my house. Patricia was systematically destroying my entire family relationships, manipulating my son against me while positioning herself as the head of the household. She'd probably been planning this takeover since the day Robert died, waiting for the right moment to strike, when I was most vulnerable and isolated. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt anger instead of despair. Patricia had underestimated me, assuming that a grieving widow would be easy to manipulate and control. She'd counted on my confusion and emotional fragility to prevent me from fighting back. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She didn't know about the safety deposit box that contained all the evidence I needed to expose her lies. At 8:30 the next morning, Helen picked me up in her old blue Honda, and we drove straight to First National Bank before Patricia even woke up. The bank manager, Mr. Peterson, had known Robert and me for decades, and his face lit up with concern when I explained what was happening. "Mrs. Georgia, that's absolutely terrible," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Let's get into that safety deposit box right away and see what documents we're working with." The safety deposit box contained everything I remembered. The original deed clearly showing Robert Georgia Thompson and Georgia Marie Thompson as joint owners with rights of survivorship, meaning I became the sole owner automatically when Robert passed away. There were the original mortgage papers, paid-in-full documents from when we'd finished paying off the house 5 years ago, and insurance records that had been in our names continuously for 30 years. Mr. Peterson examined Patricia's documents that I'd managed to photograph with my phone the night before. His expression grew more serious with each page he reviewed. "Mrs. Georgia, these documents are sophisticated forgeries, but they're missing several crucial elements that would be required for any legitimate property transfer." He pointed out discrepancies in the notary stamps, incorrect legal language in the deed transfer, and bank routing numbers that didn't match any legitimate financial institutions. If your son had actually transferred this property, there would be official filings with the county recorder's office, notarized signatures from both parties, and documentation that you would have been required to sign personally. The bank's legal department provided me with certified copies of all the authentic ownership documents, along with a letter confirming that no legitimate property transfers had ever occurred. Mr. Peterson also offered to contact the county sheriff's office about the attempted fraud, since presenting false documents to claim property ownership was a serious crime. Armed with irrefutable evidence, Helen and I drove back to my house to find Patricia directing even more moving men to load my bedroom furniture into a second truck. She'd been busy while I was gone, probably hoping to complete her theft before I could figure out what was really happening. This time I walked up to Patricia with complete confidence, instead of the confusion and fear I'd felt the day before. "Stop everything right now," I announced in a voice loud enough for all the moving men to hear. "I have proof that this woman is attempting to steal my property through fraudulent documents." Patricia's face flushed red, but she tried to maintain her authoritative demeanor. Georgia, you're making a scene in front of the neighbors. Go back inside and let the professionals handle this situation. I pulled out the certified copies of the real deed and handed them to the supervisor of the moving crew. This is my house, I said clearly. I am the sole legal owner, and I never gave anyone permission to remove my belongings or transfer my property to anyone else. The moving supervisor examined the documents while Patricia began protesting loudly about contracts and legal authority. "Mom," he said to Patricia, "we're going to need to see matching documentation before we can continue this job. These papers show a different owner than what you told us yesterday." Patricia's confidence began to crack as she realized her carefully constructed lies were falling apart. "Those documents are old, Bertha," she insisted. "The property transfer happened after those papers were filed. Call Marcus, and he'll confirm everything." "Let's call Marcus right now," I agreed, pulling out my phone. "But this time he's going to hear the truth about what his mother-in-law has been doing." Patricia tried to grab my phone, but I stepped back and dialed Marcus's work number. When he answered, I put the call on speaker so everyone could hear. "Marcus, this is your mother calling from our family home. I need you to come here immediately because I have proof that Patricia has been lying to both of us about property ownership and legal documents. The house was never transferred to your name, and Patricia has been using forged papers to try to steal it from me." There was a long pause before Marcus spoke, and I could hear the confusion and concern in his voice. "Mom, what are you talking about? Patricia showed me all the paperwork." "The paperwork was fake, Marcus. I have the real documents from the bank, and I'm standing here with moving men who can confirm that Patricia hired them under false pretenses. Your mother-in-law has been planning to steal our house and remove me from your family's life permanently." Within an hour, Marcus arrived home to find his mother presenting authentic legal documents to his mother-in-law, whose entire story was crumbling under the weight of evidence and scrutiny. The moving men had stopped work completely and were demanding proper authorization before touching another piece of furniture. Marcus looked genuinely shocked as he examined the certified copies of the real deed bank records and legal documentation that proved I'd been the legitimate owner all along. "Patricia, what is this? You told me that Mom had signed papers transferring the house to me for estate planning purposes." Patricia's face was pale, but she still tried to maintain control of the situation. "Marcus, your mother is confused about the legal process. Sometimes elderly people forget signing important documents, especially when they're dealing with grief and emotional instability." I handed Marcus the letter from the bank's legal department, explaining how Patricia's documents were forgeries. "Read this, son. Mr. Peterson examined every paper Patricia showed us, and he's identified multiple elements that prove they're fake. If you had really transferred this property, there would be official filings with the county that we can verify right now." Marcus called the county recorder's office from his cell phone while Patricia watched nervously. After a brief conversation, he hung up looking stunned. "There are no property transfer records filed for this address in the past 5 years. Mom, the house has been in your name continuously since Dad died." Patricia's final desperate attempt to control the narrative involved claiming she was only trying to protect the family from financial problems I might create. "I was thinking about the twins' future," she insisted. "Georgia could rack up medical bills or make poor financial decisions that would put the house at risk. I was trying to secure their inheritance." "By forging legal documents and lying to my son?" I asked. "By hiring moving men to steal my furniture and trying to put me in a nursing home 3 hours away from my grandchildren. That's not protecting anyone, Patricia. That's calculated theft and emotional abuse." The truth about Patricia's manipulation came out piece by piece as Marcus began to understand how she'd been poisoning him against his own mother. She'd convinced him that I was becoming a financial burden, that my grief was affecting the children negatively, and that the house was too much responsibility for someone my age to handle alone. Sarah arrived home from work to find police officers in our driveway taking statements about the attempted fraud. Her mother was being questioned about the forged documents while Marcus sat on our front porch looking like he'd been hit by a truck. "I'm so sorry, Georgia," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. I knew something felt wrong about the whole situation, but my mother convinced me that she was helping solve problems I didn't understand. She told me that you'd agreed to the moving plan, and that you were actually relieved to have someone else handle the details. Patricia had been playing all of us against each other, telling each person a different version of the story, to prevent anyone from comparing notes and discovering the truth. She'd told Marcus that I was financially irresponsible, told Sarah that I was eager to move, but too proud to ask for help, and told me that Marcus wanted me gone, but was too kind to say so directly. When the police officers finished their investigation, they informed Patricia that she was facing potential charges for fraud, forgery, and attempted theft. The evidence was overwhelming, and she'd admitted to creating false documents during their questioning. Patricia's final words before leaving were typical of her manipulative nature. "I was only trying to help this family succeed," she said, playing the victim even as she was being escorted to her car. Sometimes people need protection from their own poor judgment. The months that followed Patricia's exposure and removal from our lives were a journey of healing and rebuilding that tested every relationship in our family. Marcus struggled with guilt and embarrassment about how easily he'd been manipulated, and we spent many long evenings talking through what had happened and why. "I can't believe I let someone convince me that my own mother was a burden," Marcus said during one of our difficult conversations. "Everything Patricia told me seemed logical at the time, but looking back, I can see how she was systematically turning me against you." We enrolled in family counseling together, where a therapist helped Marcus understand the manipulation techniques Patricia had used. She'd exploited his natural desire to be a good provider and protector, making him believe that distancing himself from me was actually a sign of maturity and responsibility. Sarah faced her own reckoning with the toxic patterns her mother had established throughout her life. "I always knew my mother was controlling," Sarah admitted, "but I never realized how destructive she could be when she decided someone was standing in her way. She saw your close relationship with our family as a threat to her influence over me." The process of rebuilding trust wasn't easy or quick. Sarah had to work hard to prove that she was committed to protecting our family from her mother's future interference. She changed her phone number, blocked Patricia on social media, and made it clear that any contact attempts would be reported to the authorities. The twins, Emma and Sophie, noticed the tension and changes in our family dynamic, but children are resilient when they feel loved and secure. We explained to them in age-appropriate terms that sometimes adults make mistakes and hurt people they care about, but that our family was working together to fix the problems and make sure everyone felt safe and valued. Marcus took over, paying the property taxes and insurance, not because the house belonged to him, but because he wanted to contribute to maintaining the home where his children were building their own precious memories. "This house belongs to you, Mum," he said firmly, "but I want to help take care of it because it's where our family belongs together." We established new boundaries and communication systems to prevent future manipulation. Any major family decisions would be discussed openly with all affected parties present. No one person would be allowed to act as an intermediary or speak for someone else without their direct knowledge and consent. Patricia made several attempts to contact Marcus and Sarah in the months that followed, alternately apologizing for her misunderstanding and threatening legal action for her wrongful treatment. Each attempt was documented and reported to the authorities as part of the ongoing legal case against her. The legal proceedings moved slowly but steadily forward. Patricia's lawyer eventually advised her to accept a plea agreement that included restitution for the moving costs and legal fees, along with a restraining order that prevented her from contacting any member of our family. As I sit here now in my living room watching Emma and Sophie play with their dolls on the same carpet where their father played as a child, I'm filled with gratitude for the strength I found to fight for what was rightfully mine. The house feels more precious than ever, not just because it's filled with memories, but because it represents the importance of standing up for truth even when doing so might cost you relationships you value. The betrayal taught me that real love doesn't require manipulation or deception. Marcus's love for me didn't disappear when Patricia tried to poison it. It just got buried under lies and confusion that needed to be cleared away. Sarah's appreciation for our relationship didn't vanish. It just got overshadowed by fear and guilt about her mother's approval. I learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish, especially when toxic people are trying to destroy not just your security, but your connections to the people you love most. Sometimes standing up for truth means accepting that some relationships might not survive the confrontation, but it also means giving authentic relationships the chance to grow stronger. The most important lesson came from realizing that family loyalty shouldn't require you to accept abuse or manipulation. Real family members want what's genuinely best for you, not what's convenient for them or what serves someone else's agenda. Today, my house is once again filled with the sounds of family life, Marcus working in the garage on weekend projects, just like his father used to do, Sarah teaching the twins to bake cookies in my kitchen, and children's laughter echoing through rooms that have witnessed 3 generations of love and growth. Have you ever faced a situation where someone tried to manipulate your family relationships or take something that belonged to you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below about how you found the strength to fight back against people who tried to deceive or control you. Please hit that like button if this story reminded you that standing up for truth is always worth the effort. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding courage in life's most challenging moments. Share this video with someone who might need encouragement to trust their instincts and fight for what's rightfully theirs. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your home, your family, and your peace of mind are worth protecting, no matter who tries to convince you otherwise. May you always have the wisdom to recognize manipulation and the courage to stand up for truth, even when it's difficult.